In the serene town of Willow Creek, tucked into the verdant hills of upstate New York, Evelyn Harper lived a life that appeared, to all who knew her, as the epitome of small-town contentment. At 55, she was a woman of poise, her auburn hair now threaded with silver, framing a face that still held the glow of her younger years. Her days revolved around the rhythm of routine, managing Willow Creek Books, the town's cozy bookstore, tending to her garden filled with roses and lavender, and hosting lively book club meetings that drew the town's most avid readers. Her smile was a fixture in the community, warm and familiar, yet beneath it lay a heart quietly stirring, restless in ways she couldn't yet name. Her son, Daniel, was 32, a freelance photographer whose return to Willow Creek had been the talk of the town. After years of traversing the globe, capturing the raw beauty of Moroccan deserts, the chaos of Tokyo streets, and the quiet dignity of rural Appalachian life, he had come home. Tall, with his late father's sharp jawline and Evelyn's hazel eyes, Daniel carried an air of worldliness that set him apart in their quaint town. His father, Michael, had passed 5 years earlier, leaving a void that had sent Daniel wandering in search of meaning. Now, back in the house where he'd grown up, he was rediscovering his roots, and, unexpectedly, his mother. It began with the small moments that fill a home. Daniel's return brought a vitality that Evelyn hadn't realized she'd missed. The house, once silent save for the ticking of the grandfather clock, now hummed with his presence. His laughter echoed through the halls as he recounted tales of his travels, his guitar strummed soft melodies in the evenings, and the scent of his cooking, spiced dishes inspired by far-off places, filled the kitchen. Evelyn found herself lingering in doorways, watching him chop vegetables with a practiced ease or adjust the lens of his camera with a focus that felt almost reverent. She told herself it was pride, a mother's joy in seeing her son grown into a man of such depth and charm. But there was something else, a warmth that bloomed in her chest, a quickening of her pulse when he was near. She tried to push it away. Evelyn threw herself into her work, spending long hours rearranging bookshelves or pruning her garden until her hands ached. She even considered dating, though the thought felt absurd. Willow Creek's eligible bachelors were kind but uninspiring, and her heart wasn't in it. Yet Daniel was always there, a constant presence that tugged at her in ways she couldn't ignore. They'd work side by side in the garden, his hands brushing hers as they reached for the same weed, or sit across from each other at the dinner table, his stories painting vivid pictures of places she'd never seen. His voice, low and intimate in the candlelight, stirred something deep within her, something she hadn't felt in years. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves turned to shades of gold and crimson, Evelyn and Daniel sat on the porch, wrapped in wool blankets against the chill. The sky was a canvas of stars, and the air carried the faint scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Daniel was telling her about a photograph he'd taken in Morocco, a portrait of an elderly woman whose eyes held a story he couldn't quite capture. Evelyn listened, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her heart aching with a longing she couldn't name. "You see so much beauty in the world," she said softly, her voice barely above the rustle of leaves. "I wonder if you ever see it here, in this quiet little town?" Daniel turned to her, his gaze steady, his hazel eyes catching the starlight. "I see it, Mom. I see it in you." The words hung between them, simple yet weighted with an unspoken truth. Evelyn felt her breath catch, her cheeks flushing despite the cool air. She wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as a son's flattery, but something in his eyes held her there, unguarded and vulnerable. For a moment, the world was just the two of them, the lines of mother and son blurring in the stillness of the night. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn found herself caught in a current she couldn't resist. Her thoughts lingered on Daniel, on the way his hands moved with quiet confidence, the way his smile seemed meant just for her. She began to seek him out, suggesting they take walks through the town's wooded trails, where the crunch of leaves underfoot felt like a shared secret. They'd spend evenings watching old movies, curled up on the couch, her shoulder brushing against his. She noticed how she adjusted her appearance before he came downstairs, choosing sweaters in soft colors that made her feel younger, brushing her hair until it shone. Daniel, too, seemed to lean into their time together. He'd linger after dinner, his hand resting on hers as they cleared the table, or pull her into a spontaneous dance in the living room, their laughter mingling with the music. The town saw their closeness and smiled. To Willow Creek, they were a devoted mother and son, healing the distance of years apart. Friends commented on how lucky Evelyn was to have Daniel back, how good it was to see them so connected. But Evelyn knew the truth. Her feelings had crossed a line, no longer maternal but something deeper, something forbidden. She wrestled with guilt, lying awake at night, her mind replaying every touch, every glance. She prayed for clarity, for the strength to pull back, but the pull was too strong. Like a tide drawing her out to sea, winter came blanketing Willow Creek in snow. One night, as the flakes fell softly outside, Evelyn and Daniel sat by the fireplace, a bottle of Merlot between them. The room was warm, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Daniel was showing her his latest photographs, his voice animated as he described the interplay of light and shadow in a shot of the town's frozen lake. Evelyn watched him, her heart swelling with an ache she could no longer deny. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, "do you ever feel something you know you shouldn't?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap, the weight of her words pressing against her chest. "I mean, something that feels right, but the world would say it's wrong. Something you can't help." The silence that followed was heavy, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Daniel set his glass down, his eyes searching hers. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "I've felt it too." The confession shattered something in Evelyn, a dam she'd built to hold back her emotions. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling as they found his. "I don't know what this is," she whispered, her voice raw. "But I can't stop it." Daniel didn't pull away. Instead, he tightened his grip, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that felt both tender and electric. "Neither can I," he said, his voice barely audible. What followed was a slow, inevitable unraveling. They didn't speak of it again, not directly, but their interactions shifted. A touch lingered longer, a glance carried more weight. Evelyn found excuses to be near him, adjusting his scarf before he left the house, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Daniel reciprocated, his gestures subtle but deliberate, a hand on her shoulder as he passed, a smile that felt too intimate for a son. They moved through their days with a careful dance, balancing on the edge of something neither could fully name. Spring arrived, painting Willow Creek in shades of green and pink. The cherry blossoms bloomed outside the bookstore, their petals drifting like soft promises. One evening, as the town settled into its quiet rhythm, Evelyn and Daniel found themselves alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after a dinner of roasted chicken and rosemary potatoes. Their hands brushed while reaching for the same dish, and neither moved away. Evelyn's heart pounded as she looked up at him, his face inches from hers, his breath warm against her skin. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice a plea, a question, a surrender. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he leaned closer, his eyes searching hers for permission, for absolution. The world seemed to pause, the boundaries they'd both respected crumbling in Their lips met, tentative at first, then with a hunger that consumed them both. It was a moment of crossing a line they could never uncross, a moment that redefined everything they were to each other. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn and Daniel navigated their new reality with a mix of passion and secrecy. They were careful, meticulous even, never letting their affection show beyond the walls of their home. To the outside world, they were still mother and son, bound by love and history. But in private, they were something else. Lovers, entangled in a bond that defied explanation. Their moments together were stolen, fleeting. A kiss in the hallway when the house was quiet, a shared glance over breakfast that spoke volumes. Evelyn lived for these moments even as guilt gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the world's judgment. Daniel, too, seemed consumed by their connection. He'd leave notes for her on the kitchen counter, simple words like "you're beautiful" scrawled in his careful handwriting. He'd pull her close when they were alone, his touch both gentle and urgent, as if he too feared their time was finite. They spoke little of the future, but when they did, it was of dreams. Leaving Willow Creek, finding a place where no one knew their past, where they could be together without fear. The town remained oblivious, but Evelyn lived in constant awareness of the risk. She knew what discovery would mean: scandal, ostracism, the destruction of everything she'd built. Yet she couldn't let go. Daniel was her heart, her home, her everything, and he too seemed bound to her, his devotion unwavering despite the weight of their secret. Their love was not reckless but deliberate, rooted in years of shared memories and unspoken longing. It was a love that challenged every rule, yet felt, to them, like the most natural thing in the world. They moved through their days with a quiet intensity, their connection a thread that held them together even as it threatened to unravel their lives. As summer approached, Evelyn and Daniel began to plan in earnest. They spoke of cities far from Willow Creek, Seattle perhaps, or somewhere in Europe where anonymity was easier to find. They saved money, researched apartments, and dreamed of a life where they could walk hand in hand without fear. But for now, they lived in the moment, their love a delicate balance of joy and sorrow, a story written in whispers and stolen glances. In Willow Creek, under the weight of their secret, Evelyn and Daniel found a fragile, forbidden happiness. It was a happiness that burned bright, even as it threatened to consume them. Their story was one of love in its rawest form, defying convention, defying reason, defying the world. And as they stood together in the quiet of their home, the world outside fading into insignificance, they knew they'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Their hearts, tangled and intertwined, beat as one, forever theirs, forever hidden. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for latest uploads.